Good afternoon and welcome to TVRA 134 Media Appreciation. And today we're going to be talking all about advertising. These are notes from Chapter 11 in your textbook. So first of all, advertising is the economic glue that holds most mass media together. Advertising comes in many forms, from classifieds to business ads to those providing detailed information on specific consumer products. People are increasingly finding ways to avoid ads, using DVRs to skip past ads on TV or by blocking pop-ups on web browsers. Here's an interesting ad from KFC. What do you think of this? I guess the computer is hungry for some finger-licking good chicken. Here's another one. You've probably had Heinz ketchup. Pass the Heinz. Those fries look awfully lonely without the ketchup. That piece of steak, that burger, it's all missing something, isn't it? Pass the Heinz. However, because advertising shows up in most media, the internet, movies, TV, radio, newspapers, and magazines, it serves as the constant that it holds the industries together. Without consumer advertisements, most media businesses would cease to function in their present forms. The advertising industry is growing and has been growing for the past few years. In this chapter, we will examine the early history of American advertising, including the rise of ad agencies, brand name recognition, advertising's power to create new markets, and build a consumer culture and regulation to control that power. We will also trace evolution of U.S. advertising, including the shift to emphasizing visual design in ads, specialization, and restructuring of ad agencies, and the impact of the internet. Check out this ad here from Burger King, that flame grilled. They took a little to the extreme here. I'm sure you're familiar with the newer ad campaign for Burger King with the kind of silly singing of, singing about the food and what they're eating at BK. But this is an interesting, eye-catching one, attention-grabbing. Here's another interesting ad. World travelers are more likely to be swiped right. What do you think of this one? This is for Delta Airlines. We're also in this chapter going to assess persuasive techniques in contemporary advertising, such as using testimonials, playing on people's fears, and placing products on movie sets or TV shows. And we will consider the nature of commercial speech and regulation of such speech, for example, to combat deception in advertising. And we will explore advertising's impact on our democracy. Here's another interesting ad for Chambord, which is a liqueur. And their tagline is, because no reason. Just something to make you happy is what they're saying here. What do you think of this one? What do you think of this one? This one's very interesting. See if you can find out what this one's all about. This is for a clinic. Interesting. Okay, so in the good old days, we'll talk about before the Industrial Revolution and how advertising has changed through the years. But just remember, advertising is the economic glue that holds most mass media industries together. Okay, so like I said, times have changed from the good old days of before the Industrial Revolution with advertising. Look at these two ad campaigns here. You probably recognize how branding started out in the early days. Campbell's chicken noodle soup, very recognizable soup can there. Okay, but before the Industrial Revolution, most people lived in small towns and on farms, lived in isolated areas, and produced much of what they needed, including tools, food. They were able to clothe themselves, and there were very few products for sale. All that began to change in the 1850s with the Industrial Revolution. and the linking of American villages and towns through railroads and the telegraph, and also the print media. Merchants like cereal makers wanted to advertise their wares in newspapers and magazines, giving rise to the ad agencies who made their deals. It was important to differentiate their product from competing goods, which inspired sellers to adopt advertising and boost sales. So why should you buy the brand name when you could buy possibly a cheaper generic version? Now, in these photos, you can see an old general store where you would go in and they would jot down what you needed. They would probably go in the back and get it and bring it out for you. Sold many different items for the home, for the farm, and then of course branding here with Campbell's Chicken Soup. Okay, so with Quaker Oats, the first cereal company really to register a trademark in the 1870s used William Penn and the Quaker that founded Pennsylvania in 1681, who was William Penn, to project an image of honesty, decency, and hard work. So you might buy Quaker Oats rather than a different brand of oats because you see William Penn here and you know it's going to be good and honest and pure. It even says pure right there on his paper, right? So you can trust them, is what they're saying. And of course, Quaker Oats has persevered even into today. Today's market. You see that at the grocery stores. Okay. So many patented medicines that were mostly water and high concentrations of ethyl alcohol made outrageous claims about the medical problems that they could cure. And so people called that snake oil. So you can see here, Dr. Pierce's golden medical discovery, the ideal spring tonic and blood purifier. So outrageous claims like that, creating demand. Newspaper ads made folks think certain brands were better than others, and advertisers were better known at that time as image makers. So a lot of these misleading medical ads spawned outrage and public cynicism. So industry codes were developed to restore consumer confidence. Partly to monitor those patent medicine claims, Congress passed the Federal Food and Drugs Act in 1906. So the Federal Food and Drugs Act monitors misleading claims in newspaper and magazine ads. That's what it did in 1906. So let's talk about some of the department stores. By the early 1890s, more than 20% of ad space was devoted to department stores. By selling huge volumes of goods, little customer service, department stores saved a lot of money and passed the savings on to the customers. Lower prices. You do want lower prices when you go to the store? So the advertising in the newspapers and magazine would drive this consumer culture. High volume and less personal service in these giant stores equals saving money. So if you go to the big box Home Depot store, they might not have as many people working to give you advice and help you out as maybe the smaller mom and pop store would have. Here's an early washing machine, modern and complete with ample capacity to do all the family linen and do it just right. An absolute necessity in the household. Saves time, trouble, and money. Got that at the Steel Roll Machine Company. What do you think of that? Would you have one of those in your home? Okay, so in 1913, advocates in the business community Better Business Bureau, whose mission included keeping tabs on deceptive advertising, and the following year, the government established the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, to help monitor advertising abuses. Alarmed by the government's willingness to step in, the players in the ad industry urged self-regulation to keep government interference at bay. So, like we just talked about in the gaming industry, self-regulation, also in the film industry. So, at the same time, advertisers recognized that little self regulation could benefit them in other ways as well. They especially wanted a formal service that tracked newspaper and magazine readership, guaranteed accurate audience measurement, and ensured that newspapers did not overcharge the clients and them. Publishers formed the Audit Bureau of Investigation to monitor circulation figures. So they kept this name 98 years before changing in 2012 to Alliance for Audited Media. Advertisers were thought to have a strong influence on values. So, enter radio as far as advertising. First, of course, we had newspapers and magazine for print ads, but now we have radio. So we have advertisements that will need some audio, and then of course TV ads, which we need some graphics. We also need audio, of course, but we would also need some other video pieces. Same concerns about values, but a new medium meant more intrusion and more moral concerns for people. So the War Ad Council people thought that advertisers had too strong an influence over people and were getting a bad name, that ads created needs that consumers never knew they had even had, and had too strong a hand in the economy. In order to promote a more positive self-image, the ad industry created the War Ad Council, and chose a dozen worthy causes annually and produces pro bono public service announcements. Advertisers began organizing war bond sales, blood donor drives, and scarce goods rationing. Now, that was during the war, but continues today. So in 1940, the War Ad Council hoped to change the image of advertising. In the 60s and 70s, ad agencies developed teams of writers to help with the visual design and imagery, as well as the copy that was read or printed. European influence with design schools helped advertising take on new looks. And today, the Ad Council still chooses worthy causes to support each year. And you've probably seen some ads that say, sponsored by the Ad Council. There's one I think of where the parents and the kids in the house were doing a mock fire drill, just to make sure they knew how to get out of the house in case there was, God forbid, a fire, and they all met at a certain spot. And so it's just, like I said, a mock fire drill at the home. You probably have these at your, at schools, but just so that the family was organized and could find each other in case there was such an incident. Okay, so the story of the Ad Council. So the idea for the Ad Council was born in November 1941. And days later, with the entry of the U.S. into World War II, we were christened the War Advertising Council and soon created a campaign to sell war bonds. More than 70 years and hundreds of campaigns later, the Ad Council remains America's leading producer of public service communications. So you can see here in 1941, advertising leader James Webb Young delivers a speech articulating the mission of the Advertising for Public Interest. 1942, War Advertising Council is founded on February 18th, 1942 to 1945. Women in war jobs, because you remember a lot of men went to fight overseas, so who could go to the factory to work here? And help out with the war effort. So women in war jobs, buy war bonds, and loose lips campaigns were created. 1943, American Red Cross campaign is launched. 1944, Smokey Bear created, helped stop forest fires. And campaigns focus on atomic weapons, world trade, and religious tolerance. And President Truman urges the Ad Council to continue work in peacetime.